I'm going to rank every current Premier League manager and then put them into a tier list ranging from world class to should be sacked. The rankings will not only be determined by their results, but also their accomplishments, their transfers, and the development of their players. Let's get into it. First up is one of my personal favorites, Andone Areola, in charge of Bournemouth, a man who is destined to end up at the bigger club soon, I think. Bournemouth were actually predicted to get relegated when he took charge 2 years ago, but he has kept them up without it even being that close, really. And what I like most about him is that he has a really exciting playing style and he's capable of adapting it in terms of their oppositions really, really well. And that makes Bournemouth able to beat pretty much everyone on their day. And he also has some really impressive development of his players. Just to name a few, we have got Solanke, Huyse, and Kerkes, who have all left to go to bigger clubs. And what's interesting about this is even though they lost a few of their best players, Bournemouth seem to be doing better than ever, which is just another compliment to the intelligence of Areola. And he has had a fantastic start to this season, sitting joint third in the league, only behind Arsenal, City, and Liverpool. Who could have guessed that? And of course, we're only 10 games in, but that's still really, really impressive. We also have to mention the fact that Semenyo has had a brilliant start, looking like one of the best players in the Prem right now, being rumored to go to bigger clubs. And that's also a player that no one really was talking about before Areola developed him. And to bring so much out of a Finn squad by Premier League standards, that is nothing short of incredible, in my opinion. Therefore, I'm going to put Areola in elite. Moving on to the manager of the best team in the Premier League right now. Of course, it's Mikel Arteta, who's in charge of Arsenal. And I mean, Arsenal's form is nothing short of amazing. Just look at these last 5 games here. 5 solid wins without even conceding a goal. That's nothing short of fantastic. But some critique that has been forwarded towards Arteta recently is that it is extremely boring. I mean, this Palace game sticks out. That's 90 minutes of my life I will never get back. And I've heard a lot of people say that they rather watch paint dry than to watch Arsenal. And even though I don't think Arsenal fans care because you get the results, you look really, really good, the entertainment aspect is something that Arteta's cutting a lot of flack for, and I think rightly so. But nonetheless, he's still an amazing coach. And like I mentioned, Arsenal fans won't be complaining as long as they're winning games. That's what it's all about, not really how you do it. Um, he has had some really, really solid development of players like Saka, Gabriel, just to name a few. And he has also got a pretty good success rate in terms of transfers. I mean, Rice, Raya, even though they were expensive, they've proven to be really, really world class signings at this point. Um, However, as I mentioned, in terms of transfers, he has had a good hit rate, but he spent a lot of money. And when you look at the accomplishments, as I mentioned in the start of the video, which is one of the aspects I'm grading the coaches on, I mean, it's just empty as the trophy cabinet at Spurs. Arteta has barely won anything, and with the amount of money he has spent and the years he has spent at the club, I just can't put him anywhere higher than elite. I'm sorry. You may think I'm harsh, but this is the way to grade it, I think, because how can you say that he's world class if he spent that many millions and never really won anything? If he wins the league this season, as I probably think they will, they are a huge favorite to do so. I may have to reassess, but right now he's going in elite. Up next is Unai Emery, a really interesting character to say the least, and quite difficult to judge his reign thus far as Aston Villa. I mean, it was a dreadful start to this season, and a lot worse than I predicted, but recently they have cleaned it up and they look quite solid again. Um, I mean, most people would agree that Unai Emery is a strategic mastermind, and for that he deserves immense praise because he has shown that he, a bit like Iriola that I mentioned before, can beat anyone on his day, even though he might not have the players and the squad to do it. Um, However, there are more aspects to judge him on, such as transfers. I mean, this is a big one. We don't know how involved he has been, but the transfers have been below par. They really have. I mean, there's a few that go under the radar. I mean, Onana, Digne, Torres. These are good players, but they're like a 6 out of 10, and that's good. If your bulk of transfers are around a 6 out of 10, you're doing all right. But to not have any real hits and then a few flops, and I mean, this summer was just worse than ever. Bringing in Lindelof and Sancho, I mean, what's the ambition? Really? Sancho has done nothing but cry at Manchester United, and Victor Lindelof is happy to sit at the bench, and that's two of your biggest transfers. It really isn't enough. And the whole Martinez situation when he just answered Bisso in a press conference, and to then go back to playing Martinez, some people might think that that's the correct decision, but it doesn't look good at Emery at all. However, the counterpoint here is that he hasn't had the biggest budget, and he has done pretty well, especially a couple of seasons ago. It doesn't look as good now, but if Watkins can find some form again and they do a few more transfers, I've still got hope that Unai Emery can turn this around. And like I mentioned at the start, of course, strategically, a sublime manager, and I'm going to put them in decent. Up next is the guy who took charge of Brentford this summer as Thomas Frank departed to Spurs. Of course, it's Keith Andrews, who's actually done pretty well considering his lack of managerial experience at the top level. And I was a bit skeptical of him going into the season, not gonna lie. But like I said, he's done better than most people, I think, expected him to. Especially when you consider the fact that they lost Embuemo and Wissa, their two best players, as well as Nørgaard in the midfield. Ouattara has been a pretty decent signing, but nothing really spectacular. Kelleher has been a really good addition in the goal as well, adding some stability. Thiago, even though he joined last summer, I believe, has really hit the stride this season and looks very, very good. So Brentford overachieving in my opinion, considering their budget and, like I said, the inexperienced manager. But Keith Andrews making it work somehow with two outstanding victories over both Liverpool and Manchester United. So quite a solid start for them. And in my opinion, it has to be considered a successful season for Brentford if they even stay up, considering how little they spent on transfer in comparison to other Premier League clubs. And it really looks like they are not going to get relegated this season. So props to Keith Andrews. It's early, so it's difficult to put him spot on, but in my opinion, he goes into decent. Up next, we have the youngest manager in the Premier League at 32 years old, Fabian Hurschler. Sorry for the pronunciation there, but in charge of Brighton, of course. eh, he has done quite well. I mean, it's no controversial take to say that Brighton can beat anyone on their day, and their playing style is usually very impressive. We can, however, see that you can exploit it. Even Manchester United, who aren't doing the best at the minute, had quite a comfortable game, mostly against Brighton, when they pressed them in the right moments and could just capitalize on Brighton's high line. And that's something that Ursula needs to look over. But other than that, I mean, the signings are doing really well. They continue to develop talent like Ayari, Baleba, Minte. I mean, all players who are just getting better and better, combined with some older players like Milner and Welbeck doing a lot better than most people would expect them to, considering their age and the miles on the clock there. And Hursler, really interesting guy. I mean, at 32 years old, being able to beat such good teams and have developed such good talents as well. Credit to him. A bit like Andrews, I think it's difficult to put him in the right bracket because we haven't seen him tested that much. A few holes, as I mentioned, but all in all, a solid coach and an exciting one as well. I'm going to put him in decent. Our next manager is Scott Parker, who is in charge of, in my opinion, the worst team in the entire Premier League, Burnley, who although they've gotten a few decent wins against Leeds, Wolves, obviously Sunderland earlier on, and some narrow defeats as well, which is quite impressive considering that a lot of us think that they have the worst team in the entire league. I just don't think it's good enough to stay up. At the minute, as we speak, they are above the relegation zone here, just about 3 points above West Ham. But I think that the quality of the other teams will show, and there just aren't three worse teams than Burnley in the league right now. It's hard because I don't want to be too harsh considering they have one of the smallest budgets and they aren't doing too bad either. They're not like when we see a Southampton in the league who barely take a point. Burnley are fighting and doing quite well, and I will give Scott Parker some credit for playing to his team's strengths at least. And maybe they can get something out of the season and stay up. And in that case, I will change my opinion. But at the minute, I have to put Scott Parker in poor. Okay, now it's time for one of my controversial takes here. Enzo Maresca is the next guy up. And although Chelsea sit at fifth, joint fifth that is, in the league right now, and they have looked good, especially in Europe, we have to say, I'm not the fan. I don't get the hype with Enzo Maresca. I mean, you could say that he has gotten the best out of some of his players, Cucurella, Caicedo, players who look really, really decent. Enzo Fernandez, of course. But I mean, the playing style, when they went to Old Trafford, especially, even though they got an early red card, it just doesn't look good enough. They also got some criticism, and rightfully so, against Sunderland when they conceded at home at Stamford Bridge, and the players walk back to the center circle. I mean, if I was a Chelsea fan, I would be beyond agitated. So difficult one for me because I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but I don't like Enzo Maresca as a coach. Maybe I should take my bias out of the question and look at it more factually. And his hit rate with transfer has been alright. I just can't get it out of my head that he's a bit overhyped though. And when it's crunch time and he has the really difficult moments, I don't think he delivers as a coach. And therefore, I'm gonna put him in poor. Moving on to possibly the most hyped manager this season this far, Oliver Glasner in charge of Crystal Palace. A really interesting one. Is the hype around Glasner justified? I'm a bit torn. What I want to give him the most praise for, though, is that he does something that a lot of managers won't, and that's to play to his team's strengths. We see a lot of managers, in my opinion, who come into a team and try and implement a playing style that just don't work with the players they've got, and that rarely works out. What Glasner's done is just come in, played on the counter, which suits Palace really well. That's what they're good at. And like we see, that has really gotten the results. I mean, just winning their first major trophy with the FA Cup last season is something that they will cherish forever. And I think he deserves immense praise, especially considering the fact he hasn't been there that long and hasn't been backed in the transfer window really as well. When he lost SA, I thought it was a bit sad, but also exciting, considering the fact that he would get some money to spend. But I mean, replacing Esse with Pino, not really the move, in my opinion. Can work out in the long run, but they need to back him a bit more, considering the money that Palace have now as well. Because of the success of Glasner, I think back him more and you will see results. All in all, in the short time he's been here, I've been very impressed by Oliver Glasner, to be honest. And I'm going to put him in elite. And then moving to the other side of the hype spectrum, I don't know if unhyped is even a word, but if it is, it fits in better with David Moyes than anything else. I mean, how is this guy still a manager? I mean, I respect the legacy of David Moyes. You can't really talk down on what he's achieved in his career, but is he a 2025 modern game Premier League manager? Absolutely not. I mean, Everton haven't done too badly, but it does get slept on that they actually have a pretty decent squad. So I think that you know, the expectations should be a bit higher on Everton, and David Moyes just hasn't got the strategic ability to take them as far as I think they can go. And if you want to settle with a coach who can just keep you above the relegation zone and maybe get you a 13th to 10th place, sure, do so. But by the ambition of the owners, I think, and the fans especially, in such a proud club as Everton, I think that they will expect and want a bit more. And in that case, David Moyes is not your guy, and I think he should be doing a lot more. Will he prove me wrong this season? Quite possibly. Of course, I don't think so, but only time will tell. But at the minute, I'm gonna have to put David Moyes that should be sacked, and that's controversial, I know. Moving on to a bit of an underrated manager, in my opinion, it's Marco Silva at Fulham. And of course, this season and the last hasn't been too good from Fulham, but what I think a lot of people forget in this discussion is that he managed to take Fulham up to the Premier League, breaking the championship points record at the time. And then, when people expected Fulham to get relegated the coming season, they finished 10th, which is extremely impressive, especially with the squad they had. And what I also want to give Silva credit for is that he doesn't move his squad around too much in terms of transfers, that is. I mean, he keeps a lot of the players the same and he builds trust and a solid foundation. And I think Fulham are a team to count on. Of course, they're never gonna be a top club or even maybe the top half because the owners don't spend the money and he's a football manager, he's not a magician. But all in all, a really solid manager who I hold higher than most Premier League fans, I think. And I might be wrong, but in my opinion, Marco Silva is a decent manager. Moving on to Daniel Farke of Leeds United, and a guy who I personally had to change my opinion on a bit after the start of this season because when he was at Norwich and Gladbach, I wasn't the biggest of fan. I was quite critical of Daniel Farke. But so far at Leeds this season, it's looked really solid. I mean, if you look at the form, you would not agree. But if you actually look at the games, they are playing really, really well and a lot better than the results show. And I actually think that if they keep this up, they will avoid relegation. And you have to consider that a success. Football might not be the best. It can be shaky at times. And of course, it's just not about the expected goals and points, right? It's about actually getting the points that are expected. But all in all, the transfers as well have been good. I don't know, like I mentioned earlier, how involved he is in the transfer, but a manager always has something to say about them. So time will tell on Fark as well, since this is his first season in the Premier League with Leeds. But I'm gonna put him in decent. Up next, we have the latest manager to win the Premier League. Of course, it's Arne Slot of Liverpool, and there are a lot of split opinions when it comes to Slot and his reign at Liverpool. Of course, it's incredibly impressive to win the league in your first season in charge. However, you have to remember that he won the league with an intact, more than less, squad from Jurgen Klopp that Klopp had spent many, many years perfecting. So that merit may not be as heavy as some people make it out to be. Of course, it's impressive, but maybe not as good as we may think on the surface. And this season, when he has gotten his own signings, unlike the first summer, it hasn't looked good, has it? I mean, they are sitting third in the league, which is, of course, acceptable, but the results themselves have been everything else but good. It's incredibly shaky for Liverpool, and they just seem to be lacking some sort of unity and chemistry almost, even though a lot of the playing squad is the same as last season when they won the league. Very strange, very odd. And Slot has been making a lot of a lot of excuses like Jurgen Klopp used to for his performances, and he hasn't been taking a lot of accountability. something that I'm not a fan of, and I think you should be doing that as a top tier coach. So, however, as I mentioned, you can't critique him too much because I mean the new signings getting a lot of flack, Verts, Isak, etc. But they have only been here for like a month or two. You can't really rate them this soon. Slot is a tough one. I would hear out people who put him in world class since his achievement in the first season. I'm just going off my totally own opinion would be decent, but considering his results, we're gonna have to put him in elite, I think. And then the most prolific manager in the Premier League over the latest decade, the achievements of Pep Guardiola at Manchester City are nothing short of outstanding. One of the things that really has impressed me with Pep, and I think goes under the radar a bit, is that he managed to bring his own playing style into the toughest league in the world. And not only that, but the fact that he has dominated his opposition. Of course, it took a few years until it worked in full force, but that's also credit to Pep, how he never lost faith in his own idea of his playing style. And not only that, but he has even been able to replace his aging stars with new ones, which is also a skill that only a select few managers possesses. And something that personally impressed me a lot was changing from Aguero, one of the greatest Premier League strikers ever, to a false nine when he played like Gabriel Jesus and De Bruyne in some weird dynamic duo that really worked out. Um, and then he abandoned that and went to big target man, which he had really never done before, and had obviously Erling Haaland coming in to the team. And personally, I thought that Haaland would do quite well because he's physical and all that, and an incredible striker. But it wasn't what Pep's system was used to doing, at least not at Manchester City, but it has worked. By gosh, has it worked? I mean, Holland is looking like he can be the greatest Premier League striker ever. And of course, it's not now, but he has the potential. His numbers are just insanely good. Um, However, I don't want to be that guy, but the elephant in the room here is the 115. How would Pep Guardiola have done if he wouldn't have cheated financially? And of course, it's not him personally, it's Manchester City, the whole club, but he has reaped the rewards in terms of being able to spend too much money, and by God, have they spent money? To quote Kanye West, I guess we'll never know. I'm gonna put Pep Guardiola in world class. I think that's where he belongs purely as a coach. But if you have better morals than me, I would totally accept if you want to put him lower. Moving across Manchester then to Ruben Amorim at Manchester United. And Ruben is one of the managers who's gotten the most criticism this season. Is it justified? I think I'm a bit torn when it comes to Ruben Amorim here. I respect and commend him for the fact that he sticks to his system and his idea. And I don't believe that it's justified when fans, even pundits and so-called experts and media are giving him flack for sticking to a system, like it would be impossible to succeed with the free back. Pep has done it at times, Mourinho has done it, Conte has done it, so that's just ridiculous, to be honest. But what I think you should critique him for is the fact that he plays a midfield two of Fernandes and Casemiro. If you want to get away with playing in midfield two in the Premier League these days against all these really physical midfields, you have to make that midfield two count. And playing in number 10 in Bruno Fernandes with no physicality at all and an aging slow Casemiro, it just doesn't work out. And we see it time and time again. Sometimes it does, like against Liverpool and then against Brighton, but mostly it doesn't. And Manchester United get found out because of this. It's probably the biggest weak point in their entire team because it affects the defense, it affects the attack. It's basically the spine of the team that just isn't strong enough, and then everything else crumbles. Another thing Ruben Amorim has been getting criticized for is his substitutions, or should I say lack of substitutions, like in the draw against Forest most recently, when he barely changed any midfielders or attackers. He just kept on changing his defenders, which is really strange. And his comments afterwards didn't fill me with confidence that he's going to do well. You know, he said something along the lines of, "Oh, I don't want to just around too much with the attackers and disrupt what they have going on." And you look at the game like you barely had a shot on goal. Surely it should be the smarter thing to do a substitution here. So all in all, I think it's a tough one. One last thing is I don't think you can succeed at Manchester United with this ownership. No one else has done it since Sir Alex Ferguson, and I mean we don't need to explain how special he was. So, in my opinion, I'm sorry, it's only a matter of time before the pressure will pile on from the media, from the fans, and the owners will try and save their own skin by sacking Ruben Amorim. I'm gonna go ahead and put him in poor. Moving on, we have a somewhat polarizing figure. It's Eddie Howe in charge of Newcastle United, and I have to start off with saying that I was completely wrong about Eddie Howe. When he took the Newcastle job, I thought that it was too much too soon and that his level was bottom of the Premier League. But he's really proved me wrong, and his impact is hard to overstate at Newcastle. What impresses me the most with Eddie is just his ability to build a team and build a team spirit that always keeps fighting. Because that's not as easy as it sounds. And he's also had a very good hit rate when it comes to transfers. Newcastle are obviously a very rich club, but they haven't been able to spend all that money, of course, because of FFP. But the signings they have made, like Guimaraes, Tonali, Botman, Voltemade, have almost all of them have proven to be really, really good so far. And honestly, in my opinion, if Newcastle decide to stick with Eddie Howe and back him fully like he deserves, I think he can take him really far. Even though we have to acknowledge that they've had a shaky start to this season, he has managed to win them that Carabao Cup and get them into the Champions League on several occasions. So a really solid job from Eddie Howe, and I'm gonna put him in elite. Moving on to my favorite manager in the entire Premier League, Sean Dyche. How he managed to get this Nottingham Forest job is beyond me. I love Sean Dyche. Is such a character and just a staple piece of the Premier League. But his tactics really, how can they ever be enough to get Forest where they want to be? I mean, Sean Dyche has failed at clubs like Burnley and Everton, whose main goals are to stay up. And now he takes a team in the Europa League who want to be fighting for European spots. Strange decision making from the owner of Forest, but he seems like a bit of a strange guy, as we all know. However, Sean Dyche, I mean, when he's been scrapping in the relegation battles, he can come out of it quite well sometimes. And he one thing you have to say about Sean Dyche is that his teams are very disciplined, and he it doesn't take long for him to implement his playing style. Although it's quite basic, in my opinion, he really gets it into his players, which is of course a plus. All in all, though, I'm sorry, Sean. I'm gonna put him in poor, just basically because I can't put him in. Should be sacked when he's been there like a couple of weeks. Moving on to the fourth team in the Premier League right now, Regie Lebris. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, but I'm sorry. Sunderland. How are they fourth? I'm not sure, but what I do know is they've been playing a lot better than most of us expected, and I can't really put it down to luck either. I mean, some people would say that they've not deserved all of their results, but I've actually seen a lot of Sunderland games, and except for the Manchester United game and the Burnley game, they've been really good. I mean, it looked like, a top six, top seven side who can be competing for Europe, which is just insane considering the fact that they are newly promoted and most people thought that they would go down. So, of course, I'm not really expecting this form to continue, but when we look at the squad here, they have some really decent players. I mean, this does not look like a newly promoted side, if you ask me. And we have to put it down to the coach, Lebris here. The signing's really solid. He's he's playing to his team's strength, which is quite simple in theory, but not a lot of managers do it, especially when they're newly promoted. So if it continues like this, they can be like top half of the table, which would be an immense success for Sunderland. So even though it's gonna look weird here with the other managers, we're going off accomplishments and transfers and results, and therefore Redi Lebris goes in elite. Next up, we have the Tottenham boss, Thomas Frank. But he did the bulk of his job in the Premier League at Brentford, and that's the best part of his career this far, I think. Of course, he's only been in the Tottenham job for a couple of months, so it's really hard to judge him. He did, however, have some interesting comments here when they lost against Chelsea, and he went quite hard on his team, I think. That usually doesn't work out. We've seen it before with Conte at Spurs, actually, and he got the sack a few weeks after. So, but I do hold Thomas Frank as a good coach. His work at Brentford was really impressive, building that team and that team spirit, especially, and also developing his talents very, very well. I think Thomas Frank is a great coach. However, I don't think it will work out at Spurs. I don't think that his playing style suits the Tottenham fans, and that when they turn against him, I can't see it lasting. But personally, I would put Thomas Frank in decent. Moving on to one of the worst teams in the entire Premier League right now, and the manager of West Ham United is, of course, Nuno Espirito Santos. And it hasn't been good, has it? I mean, he obviously had that fallout with the owner at Nottingham Forest. Hard to say who's to blame there. But I'm not a fan of Nuno. I mean, at Wolves, he was really good, but that was a long time ago. Then he sold himself to Spurs, where he was like for 2 or 3 months. Got manager of the month in his first season, but then it was terrible. And I struggle to see a philosophy, if I'm going to be brutally honest, when Nuno is managing teams. And it hasn't been different. It wasn't at Forest, I think, or at West Ham. However, I always believe that you should give every manager time. So, of course, West Ham should do so, probably this season, maybe next, depending on how bad it gets. They did get a very crucial win here last Sunday against Newcastle. Very impressive, but was that a case of West Ham being good or Newcastle being bad, or maybe a bit of both? You tell me. But it has been very, very poor from West Ham. If they continue as they've done, they will even face the risk of getting relegated here. So, like I said, you have to give a manager like this time. But if I was in the boardroom of West Ham United, I would sack Nuno. And then lastly, as of recording this, there are only 19 Premier League managers because Vitor Pereira of Wolves got sacked this weekend following a 3-0 loss away against Fulham. So he obviously has to go last. Not even should be sacked. He is sacked, and Wolves haven't found a replacement yet, as far as they've announced. And short about Pereira, it just wasn't good enough. People like Frank, people like Iriola and Silva, they really ruined it for Pereira because otherwise he could have maybe gotten away with the excuse that oh, we're a smaller club, we don't have the same budget. But they've proved that not only can you survive, but you can really compete in the Premier League if you just have your tactics on point as well as your ability to develop talent. So Pereira, it was time to go. Interesting to see who Wolves replace him with, though. So this is my finalized tier list of all the current Premier League managers. Let me know your thoughts, what you disagree with. I can already guess that Arsenal, Liverpool, and Chelsea fans won't be too happy with me, but that's what it's all about. It's opinion. Thank you a lot for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.